there's three things that a CEO is responsible for. One is setting the vision, so the direction. Two is getting the fuel in the tank, like the funding, so that you can drive the bus towards that direction.
Yes. Yep.
But the
Very
number
important.
yeah, three is like, how do you drive the vehicle to hit that direction? The role of data is to operationalize the growth model of the business, right? So what are the inputs up here and all the mechanisms and the flows all the way down to the top level metrics that you care about? Refining this model and reifying it, turning it into something real, is the job of the founder. And this is a real case where the more data you have, right, either it'll reinforce your decisions or it'll drive you in another direction. But in any case, it'll force you to be more rigorous and also more accountable over time.
Metaplane is a self-serve observability platform for data analytics teams. Data teams at companies like Ramp, Klaviyo, Drift, Hightouch, and more all use Metaplane to better understand their data. This includes monitoring for data quality, spend, lineage, pipeline, and so much more. Before he co-founded Metaplane, CEO Kevin Hu got his PhD from MIT. Metaplane joined Y Combinator in the winter of 2020, and now Kevin leads the team with his SQL wrangling and top-tier data. In this conversation, he sits down with Felicis partner Tobi Coker to talk about what it takes to build a data platform, how companies should approach being data-driven, and what he's learned as a founder.
All right. We have the one and only Kevin Hu, co-founder and CEO of Metaplane, here today. Thanks for coming on, Kevin.
Tobi, it's such a pleasure. It's always great to chat with you.
Thanks for joining. I was really jazzed to have this conversation. Let's hop into it.
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, cool. So being a founder, it's a very deliberate thing that people choose to do. Why be a founder? Why start your own company? Where was the draw for you?
For me, there's really two parallel tracks. One is wanting to start something new, and then one is wanting to start something in the data space. So I think for me, I haven't been super drawn to starting companies. I always wanted to solve a problem that I felt like was unsolved in the world.
Okay.
And I studied physics in undergrad. And during that time, my older sister, older sisters are the best. And in this case,
yes, they are.
She studied neuroscience as a bridge between genetics and behavior for 6 years.
Okay.
So what this really means is that she studied tilapia in tanks for 6 years. Turns out tilapia are from a region in Africa where there's a lot of lakes in like Central Africa.
Okay.
And when you have an organism in a very small habitat, they become very territorial, which means if you take one tilapia, drop them into a tank, they suddenly change their appearance and their behavior and make them good model organisms to study.
Oh.
Put that aside for a second. After 6 years, she messages me saying, "Hey, Kevin, I have all of this data, but I never learned how to write R or Python. Can you help me analyze this?" And when I saw that message, I just thought, wow, this is ridiculous, right? Why is it that she, one of the smartest people I know, and then later on, I'm going to realize this is most people in the world, she knows what questions to ask about data, and she knows how to interpret the answers and ask good follow-up questions. So why is there a bottleneck when it comes to analyzing the data itself? I thought that was absurd. So I spent the next 6 years in grad school trying to build ways to automate data analysis. And it worked out well in an academic setting, but this was in like the late 2010s. The pendulum had really swung from academia doing the most interesting work to industry having the most opportunity to have a real impact. So that's how I kind of got into the startup world.
Okay, so tilapia data. Analyzing tilapia data.
Tilapia CSV.
What's the spark that started everything?
Yes, exactly.
Did you analyze any more tilapia data in your PhD program? Or was that the end of it?
Not a lot of tilapia data, but a lot of other interesting types of data about toothpaste and about sales of makeup. And it turns out that every company in the world is a data company.
Yep.
Right?
Very cool. Very cool. So you say every company is going to be a data company, right? Or is already a data company. In your opinion, what what does that look like? Like, what does a successful data company look like? What are those attributes? What's kind of the ideal for you?
I think there's two ways to approach this. One way is to say, what does a non-data driven company look like? And then the other way is to say, what are the best companies in the world? What are the exemplars that are using data in a way that builds up a real competitive advantage compared to their competitors? So maybe if we do the first one first.
Yeah.
Like there's many decision-making frameworks in the world, right? The highest paid person in the room is also the rise of vibes-based startups.
There are plenty of those, yes.
Tons of vibes, not the kinds of vibes that we want.
Yeah.
And I think there is truth in the fact that not everything is quantifiable in the world, but generally speaking, intuition plus quantitative analysis is greater than just intuition by itself.
Well said, yeah.
And when you have this kind of quantitative analysis, it really helps make one, like the few big consequential decisions in a company, but also the many, many little micro decisions that we made. But, if we flip the script a little bit and look at the real companies that are leading with data, and we can talk about them more in depth in a second. I'm thinking of, the Ramps of the world, the Netflixes or the DoorDashes of the world, where they're not only able to achieve, I gotta say, like operational excellence.
Yes.
But also able to build products that their competitors are not able to get access to, not just because they have better engineers and better organizations, but because they have data that is truly proprietary, and that this data continues to compound over time as they build products around it.
So data is an asset for them.
Data is an asset. Data is a product.
Do you think that is more the culture that they've set up internally, or do you think it's the infrastructure that they've set up to collect the data? And one might feed from the other, but I'm curious, like, what the core motivation or foundation is for their competitive advantage with data.
I do think that the first data people at companies don't have data in their job title, right? It's founders putting together the first spreadsheets on their growth model. It's a RevOps person or a growth marketer who says, okay, I want to trigger an automation or make a dashboard based on this data in our CRM, right? And then once they want to start making that more repeatable and more robust over time, they'll hire a data person, start scaling that up. But to answer your question, I think like the first spark does come from the founders and does start at day one, honestly.
Okay. So what are you doing, or how do you think about empowering that founder to then replicate themselves or replicate their data capabilities? Like, how do you think about the empowerment of the data teams?
I think that there's one aspect of helping data teams focus on what really matters, which is not getting the perfect data stack in place, right? There's a bunch of shiny tools. Every industry has their shiny tools. But the most important thing is that data meets a use case.
Yes.
And the quality of the data is measured by the degree to which the data can meet that use case, right? If you need to use it every month, you don't need it to be real time, for example. If you wanted to make a directional decision, you don't have to have 6 digits of precision. So I think the first thing that I talk about when I talk to data teams or founders who are looking to use data is to use data as an instrument to sharpen their focus on the problems that really matter in their business. But once that's clear, then we can start talking about what are the models that you want to get in place. How do you actually socialize the data assets, like the dashboards and the automations or the machine learning models that you're going to put in place to meet those needs, and then start building trust on top of them. The trust is, not to jump the gun to what we're focusing on Metaplane, but it's something that I think is under discussed when it comes to using data at a company, right? Humans have such a bias to believing machines, right? We either treat them as oracles, right?
Or an AI, doubt them. But
exactly.
Yes.
We're very, we're very like bimodal, right?
Yeah.
Either we're very cynical or extremely optimistic. And the truth is, I think, much more pragmatic, which is that you can trust the data to the extent that you put effort into making it trustable.
Okay, so when you're describing data observability, what do you start with? Do you start with the sharpen your pencil and your ability to make business decisions, or do you lead with trust? What resonates more with customers? Or is it you tailor your pitch to, the type of customer that you might be engaging with, or the type of person you might be engaging with at the company?
It really is tailored. So to give some examples of like the split in that decision tree, if I'm talking to a founder or a data professional that comes from an engineering background,
yep.
I'll say, think of a Datadog or a Grafana or a Splunk that let you know when your infrastructure is down. Now, how great would it be if there's a similar piece of software that lets you know when the data is incorrect? That tends to resonate. But if they've never used Grafana or the like, right, then I'll try and figure out, okay, has this person experienced the pain of a data quality issue before? Now, data quality, it's a very abstract notion.
Mm-hmm.
Like data itself is abstract. Now, when you're talking about the data about the data, it's 2 layers abstract. But in reality, it looks like this. Like you're on vacation, right? Or you're like at a friend's wedding, and then the CEO slacks you saying, hey, I have a board meeting coming up and this data looks incorrect, right? We better fix this right now. And the consequence is not only that you are kind of pulled out of whatever you're doing, but that trust and that time, it's very easy to lose and very hard to regain, which comes back to the idea of building a culture around data, is that you want to keep the level of trust high. So that anytime you lose it, that's very, very painful.
Yeah. You painted the picture of trust. You painted the picture of sort of sharpening the toolkit for founders. How should founders think about data early on? Talk to us a little bit about how a founder should think about building out their data capabilities and as they grow, and how early they should think about that maybe.
So from my perspective, there's 3 things that a CEO is responsible for. 1 is setting the vision, so the direction. 2 is getting the fuel in the tank, like the funding, so that you can drive the bus towards that direction.
Yes. Yep.
For the number, 3 is like, how do you drive the vehicle to hit that direction? The role of data is to operationalize the growth model of the business, right? So what are the inputs up here and all the mechanisms and the flows all the way down to the top level metrics that you care about? Refining this model and reifying it, turning it into something real, is the job of the founder. And this is a real case where the more data you have, right, either it'll reinforce your decisions or it'll drive you in another direction. But in any case, it'll force you to be more rigorous and also more accountable over time.
Okay. So guardrails of the proverbial bus that we're driving.
Or even like having a dashboard on the bus. Right?
Dashboard? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's the OS maybe.
Right.
Okay. All right. I've nailed that down. Okay. So given that you are a data company, how have Metaplane's internal data needs changed over time? I would imagine you're probably trying to practice what you preach, right?
Yes.
And as you've grown from just you in the PhD program to over 25 full-time employees, like how have you sort of been able to practice what you preach from a data perspective?
So one thing is for sure is that like we're still early. If a startup is like Mario Kart on Rainbow Road, it's just like we're not even on lap 2 yet. But there were 2 big changes. One was pre-product market fit and one was post-product market fit. Where pre-product market fit, a lot of founders, to invoke vibes-based again, right? It's very vibes-based.
Yeah.
It's if you look at like the Andreessen or the Michael Seibel approaches, it's like, okay, you have product market fit when customers are ripping it out of your hands. How many times does this actually happen straight off of the bat? It's the way that we approached it is to say every time we pursued an idea, and we've pivoted multiple times in our startup journey so far.
Okay.
We wrote down Like these are the assumptions that have to be true in order for this to be a viable business in the long term. Another way to approach that is to say, every startup is a journey to prove the hypothesis that this company can generate $1 billion in revenue.
Mm-hmm.
The best way to prove that, have $1 billion in revenue. But before that, a lot of things have to be true. So what are the axioms that you're assuming here? For us, like those axioms around like market size, distribution, the customer, the channel. So that was pre-product market fit. Post-product market fit, it's a lot more, and this is still something that we're working on, is trying to develop that growth model, right?
Yep.
Trying to say, you put $1 into Metaplane, you get ideally more than $1 out.
Hopefully. Yes,
But,
that is the hope.
But if it's less than $1, at least we know what the dollar is, right?
Then you're trying to tease out how that happened, right?
Yes, okay. Exactly.
So what are some of your data principles internally, or maybe even externally?
And this is something that I was taught by our data scientist, who is our de facto head of data at Metaplane, David. We work together really closely. Is forget about the dashboards, right? Forget about the data that we have for a second. Like, just tell me in as plain of terms as possible what kinds of questions you're trying to answer and what kind of an action you're trying to drive. So to give an example, we have a dashboard that shows for all of our customers, how quickly have they adopted monitoring over time, right? The question we're trying to answer is how are the different trajectories of Metaplane adoption? Like, how do they look, and how can we affect them? So one is starting from the question and the action, and then two is really trying to build the minimum viable product, which in the case of data is it's not like React and getting the right like Node.js framework in place. Is like, what are the key data models that we want to define without going ham, because it's possible to go extremely ham when it comes to your data stack, and just connect those two, questions and actions, to data models, and everything else fills in the blank, right? The database you should use, the ingestion tool you should use, right? And we can always expand over time.
Tell us a little bit about, when you sort of got the data observability product up and going, like what would be your takeaways from strategies that worked well when you were first selling versus?
Founders think that they're better sellers than they are. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
And we set ourselves up for success by doing the most painful thing first, which is cold outbound.
True. Can attest.
Oh my.
Yes.
It's like, you know this.
Yeah, cold outbound's rough.
So if we back up a little bit, one of the mistakes we made early on was working with friendlies.
Yeah.
Like, we have a bunch of friends working in data at a bunch of different companies. Like, they would try out our tool, right?
Yeah.
But they don't buy it, right? And then we ask ourselves why. And the answer in hindsight is obvious, which is that if the problem was painful enough, they would have paid for it, even if it was just Kevin in a big refrigerator box. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, we printed out the CSV and I was analyzing it like this. But that was mistake number one. So, and mistake number two was thinking that we could like iterate our way to something worth paying for. So with Metaplane, with data observability, we DM'd 100 data leaders on LinkedIn. Maybe 10 of them responded, and 3 of them are still our customers today. They're all different companies, but they're still our customers. So like, as we are crossing the chasm, so to speak, from these really early adopters, innovators, to even like that first bulkhead of early adopters, those first tactics didn't work.
So how did you said they're believing in you almost as much as they are in the product. What were some of the things that you worked on personally to resonate better with customers?
Spend as much time with them as possible.
Okay.
Where
not be annoying, but like just be there. Hey, I'm Kevin.
Right,
I'm around.
Yeah, just like be present. have the shared Slack channel with them,
Okay.
hop on Zoom calls with them every day if it's required. Like meet with them in person, because I come from a data background. I know like a lot of the day to day, but it's the crevices and the details where everyone is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't really know that until you spend a lot of time with someone. So that's kind of how we filled in the gaps.
Time. That's important.
Yeah, lots of time.
You're almost trying to woo them, you know? It's like a little dance.
Yes, it's true.
That's true. So coming in from the abstract, right? Let's laser in on a use case. How specifically would a company use Metaplane?
So I'm thinking of some of our customers like Ramp and Klaviyo and Bose. Ramp is probably the best example here. They are a finance platform based here in New York, actually. So their head of data, Ian McElmer, has put a lot of effort both into making data critical to the business and to increase the competitive advantage of Ramp. So in the first case, every day in the morning, they have to deliver capital markets tapes to big backers, the names you can probably imagine. And they use Metaplane to make sure that this data is delivered on time at the level of quality that's required for the people who are providing a lot of the backing of the credit cards that they issue. But the second use case, which I love because it's very, very new and we use it, is for their price intelligence feature, where you probably sent down an invoice before and wondered, one, oh shit, this is a lot of money. But two, like, am I paying more than other people? And how much room do I have to negotiate? So in the case of Ramp, they have tons of invoices coming in that they OCR and then put into a structured data warehouse that's governed by their data team and then used to back this product. So now Ramp is using the data that they have to build a product that is not only something that's very difficult for their competitors to build, but something that customers really love. And it's all powered by data from the data team. It's not just the data team building some dashboards. It's data being used in really critical use cases and in the product itself.
And I guess in this sort of sales journey, you talked a little bit about selling to friendlies as a mistake that you've seen, that you've experienced yourself. Any others that you'd sort of steer founders away from doing as they maybe think about PLG product or selling or how to sort of bring their product to market?
Selling to friendlies is definitely number one. The number two mistake that we made was trying to sell to too many different types of companies.
So focus.
Yeah, focus. Which is, I think it's hard to pull yourself out of that because if you're building a technical product, it's very likely that it's very horizontal, right? That's one of the appeals of data to begin with, is that it's one of the few horizontally transformational technologies. But you still have to focus, right? Yeah. Not only because you build a better product and that you can reach out to people better, but because,
So you're saying focus in the product itself or focus in the buyer persona, like who should be buying it? Because there's different sort of interpretations, right? You talk to the Parker Conrads of the world and they say, we want to build a compound product. We want to build as many sort of accessory product lines as we can for the HR function. Now they're going into sales. Versus, the dodge to date has been, focus. So do you think it manifests more in the person that you're selling to or the product itself? Or both?
I think both, in that you cannot have focus in the product without knowing who you're selling to. Yeah. But no, it's a good point. That I think there is a limit to focus, and there's also validity in a horizontal approach. But it has to be backed up with a coherent theory of the world, like the compound startup. I think, and I'll just speak for ourselves. When we try to go very, very horizontal, we weren't thinking about the compound startup. We weren't thinking about ourselves as a Ramp. We were just trying to avoid the pain of having to say no to some customers because we'll take what we can get.
True. What's something that you've recently changed your mind on?
Very, very recently. And I believe the Oculus founder, Palmer.
Yeah.
Palmer had something to this effect where, like, coming from an academic background, I really wanted to be the best at a lot of things at a startup.
Okay.
At our startup, of like, if we hop in a sales call, like, I can do really well in that sales call and I can do really well in marketing. But then only, I would say, like, less than 2 months ago, I realized that, wait, this is not a good thing, right? If I'm the best at something in a company, it's a sign that I haven't hired the right people. So now my goal is to be, maybe second best at a lot of
Second
things.
best at a lot of things?
Yes.
Okay. So hire the best and coordinate.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And I guess if you operate in Silicon Valley for long enough, you get enough advice, right? Advice from VCs, unsolicited advice from VCs, advice from other founders, advice from your parents, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
What's one piece of advice that you've got that you didn't think was actually good, or that was terrible, or maybe a little bit even overrated?
So the number one thing was definitely selling to friendlies, which we talked about.
Okay.
I think the number two thing, and this is with a caveat that I think advice is very timing and founder specific, from my perspective. But no one explicitly gave this advice, but I feel like there's this undercurrent of optimism around founders of, like, you just got to, like, keep going and be really
just
persistent.
be happy.
And just be happy.
Just be happy that you're building a company.
Exactly. Yeah. And you'll figure it all out. And for me, with someone who I think has already a very optimistic, a bent.
You are optimistic, yes.
It's I feel like it wasn't good advice for me to it's not a good mindset for me to internalize. Mm-hmm. And that, being a little bit more critical and a little bit more pessimistic is a much more, like, realistic view of the world, without losing sight of the fact that, maybe I can be a little bit critical about where we are today, but that doesn't mean that tomorrow isn't great, right?
Okay.
You got to kind of, like, partition your mind and view both, and not just one or the other.
Realistic in the short term, optimistic in the long term.
That's a much more concise way to put it.
I had time to think about it. Okay. Well, Kevin, this has been an awesome conversation. Really, really enjoyed it. And thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.